Wrongful convictions. When you think about wrongful convictions, what comes to mind? Do you think of a case, perhaps, that gained sensational media attention you heard about on a podcast or watched on a Netflix docuseries? Perhaps you think of something more systemic, a coerced confession, biased investigation, a lack of accountability. Take a minute and think about what comes to mind when you hear the phrase wrongful convictions. The way that I used to teach about wrongful convictions was very much focused on the sensational and the systemic, the visible parts of a wrongful conviction, the information that we're privy to. But all of that changed when I met Christine Bunch. Christine Bunch was 21 years old when she was wrongfully convicted of murder and arson when her son Tony died in a fire. Christine spent 17 years in prison. I was introduced to Christine by a mutual friend. Christine was going to be giving a guest lecture in a course of mine. And when Christine asked me what she should focus on in her guest lecture, what part of her case I would like her to talk about, I simply told her, talk about whatever feels right to you, whatever you're comfortable with. Christine opened up her talk by walking us through the day she got out of prison. She had walked out into the prison lobby and went into the washroom there before leaving the prison. When she tried to turn on the faucet in the washroom, she couldn't figure out how to turn it on. She had to ask her brother to come in and help her. You see, the faucet was automatic. In 1996, when she went into prison, faucets were manual. It was now 2012. And in that moment, the way in which I understood wrongful convictions and the way in which I teach about wrongful convictions completely changed. Because what I was seeing, what I was hearing, this was the human side to a wrongful conviction. Now, if you were to ask somebody that has been wrongfully convicted, what is one of the hardest parts of their wrongful conviction? What has impacted them the most? You might be surprised to hear them say reintegration. Everything that happens after your name is cleared. David Milgaard, a name that you might be familiar with. David was 17 years old when he was wrongfully convicted in the rape and murder of a girl he had never met. He was in his late 30s when he got out of prison. 23 years. How do you just start your life from scratch after 23 years? You're not the same person that you were when you went into prison. Everything, life has changed so much. A wrongful conviction truly is a life sentence. And now, when I teach about wrongful convictions, I teach about wrongful convictions from a more holistic, compassionate standpoint. I teach about the less visible parts of a wrongful conviction, such as reintegration and the lifelong impact that a wrongful conviction has on everyone who has been wrongfully convicted, but also their loved ones. And the way in which someone experiences a wrongful conviction, it's not a linear process and it's not going to look the same for everyone. But what connects every single person that has been wrongfully convicted is the profound impact, the lifelong impact that a wrongful conviction has on them. I'm so passionate about expanding the way in which we understand a wrongful conviction. I'm so passionate about humanizing wrongful convictions as more than just a legal problem or just something that happens in the criminal justice system. And today, I'm very excited to share with you all a different, more intimate perspective on the impact of wrongful convictions. Did you know that the wrongfully convicted are not provided with any supports, any resources to help them reintegrate back into society? Which is problematic in general, but particularly when you're coming out of prison. No mental health supports, no job supports, housing supports. Where do you go when you get out of prison? Where do you live? How do you afford to live? What references can you even put on a rental application? Frank Ostrowski served 23 years for a murder he didn't commit. He was 60 years old when he got out of prison. He was living off of $250 a month. Thankfully, was able to live with his daughter, but what if he didn't have anywhere to go? So many people that are wrongfully convicted don't have a safety net, don't have people to help them, don't have anywhere to go. How do you find a job? Who would hire you? How do you address a gap on your CV that all you have to write in there is prison? What tangible experience can you even put on a CV? Now, you might be wondering, well, don't the wrongfully convicted receive compensation? Sometimes, but it's rare. It doesn't happen as often as you might think. In Canada, it's not automatic and it's not mandatory. Robert Baltovich served 7 years in prison when he was wrongfully convicted in the murder of a girlfriend of his. Her body was never found, and it's now thought Paul Bernardo also probably did that. But when it came to compensation for Robert Baltovich and Anthony Hannemeyer, their initial requests for compensation were met with, this is only granted in rare and unusual cases. Well, is it not rare and unusual to spend any amount of time in prison for a crime you didn't commit? Because if that's not rare and unusual, are we saying that that's just a normal thing, a normal part of our society, to send people to prison for a crime they didn't do? As I said, sometimes the wrongfully convicted do receive compensation. Charles Smith was the former chief pediatric forensic pathologist at Sick Kids in Toronto. He fabricated a number of autopsy results of children, claiming that parents and family members murdered children who had actually died of natural causes, were sick, etc. A public inquiry found that he wasn't even qualified to be in the job he was in. It took 2 years after that inquiry for the 14 people who were wrongfully convicted because of him to receive compensation. And when they did, their compensation was often referred to as a recognition payment. If you look to the bottom two headlines up here, compensation for Ontario victims of forensic pathology scandal. Those directly affected by the debacle eligible for compensation. Are 14 people being wrongfully convicted a scandal, a debacle? The media always takes a spin on everything, but particularly when it comes to the wrongfully convicted, they are always on trial in the Court of Public Appeal. And we, me, you, everyone else, we're the judge, the jury, the executioner. This is Maria Shepherd, one of the many parents that were wrongfully convicted because of Charles Smith. When Maria had her name cleared, finally, and she was standing on the steps of the Court of Appeal, one of the first questions that a reporter asked her was, "Did you always know you were innocent?" Really? Right? Did you always know you were innocent? what do you even say to that? You see, when it comes to the court of public opinion, the wrongfully convicted have such little autonomy over how others talk about them. And yes, we all can't control how others judge us, how others see us. But when it comes to the wrongfully convicted, their legacy is being created by reporters, people writing about them, interviewing them that don't know them. The stigma that goes with a wrongful conviction, it doesn't go away. And clickbait often takes precedent over compassion. This is Sherry Charette Robinson. She's also one of the many parents that were wrongfully convicted due to Charles Smith. After her name was cleared, this is what the headlines in the media look like. Baby killer label erased at long last, along with a photo of her. After Sherry's name was cleared, she went to apply for a volunteer position. And to her shock, what came back was that she had a criminal record. When they ran her name, it came back that she had a criminal record, which made no sense to her. Her name had been cleared. But when you are wrongfully convicted, in Canada at least, there is no actual declaration of innocence proclaimed by the courts. You will either be acquitted, meaning you will be found not guilty, you will have your charges withdrawn, or your charges could be stayed, meaning there is a potential to actually bring those charges back again. So think about that for a second. When somebody is wrongfully convicted and they will still have a criminal record, they actually have to apply themselves to have that expunged. Not only that, you have to pay for that, and then you have to wait, and it takes a long time. Consider the larger implications of that in terms of employment. Employers, many employers, require criminal record checks. There are even instances where landlords can require a criminal record check. So, are we saying that a wrongful conviction is essentially a clerical error? Wrongful convictions are traumatic, each and every single one, at every single stage, from the arrest, to the investigation, to the trial, to prison, to reintegration, to everything in between. And it takes a huge toll on the mental health of each and every person that has been wrongfully convicted. It's not uncommon for the wrongfully convicted to be diagnosed with PTSD. So many won't be because there are no mental health resources for them to access. Triggers become a new normal. Christine still gets triggered sometimes by the shower. It reminds her of the shower in prison. Frank Ostrowski saw somebody stabbed to death in prison in front of him. You don't just unsee that. Anyone who served a prison sentence for a crime against a child, they were likely kept in protective custody for much of their sentence. Because if you're in prison for a crime against a child, a lot of people will have it out for you. A few months ago, I had the honor of meeting David Milgaard. He was speaking at an event that I was hosting, and he brought a support worker with him, Lori, and throughout his talk, he was referring to notes he had brought with him. And what really, I think, dawned on everyone who was in the audience at that talk was how traumatic it is to talk about a wrongful conviction, to talk about everything that you've been through. If you've ever seen somebody who's wrongfully convicted do a talk, watch them do an interview, consider that after you're done watching them do their talk, after their interview, you get to just go home afterwards. You can forget about it. We get to be the audience. And the wrongfully convicted will often put themselves out there to advocate for better justice, because if they don't, who will? But imagine if you had to talk about the worst thing that ever happened to you all the time to strangers. What can we do? You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to work in the criminal justice system to support and empower the wrongfully convicted. There are so many things that everyone and anyone can do. So, are you in a position where you can hire someone that's been wrongfully convicted, offer career coaching, help with writing a CV, networking? Do you have pro bono services that you can offer, such as mental health services, counseling, therapy? Do you work in media? Do you have a podcast? Everyone has a podcast these days. Are you an influencer? The way in which you talk about wrongful convictions, write about wrongful convictions, that holds a lot of power. Be mindful, be compassionate in how you talk about wrongful convictions. Get involved with wrongful conviction volunteer organizations. There are so many out there. If you're in Canada, the Innocence Project, Innocence Canada, International Wrongful Conviction Day Committee. I co-founded an organization called the Wrongful Conviction Collective, where we offer volunteer opportunities that are all virtual. But really, more than anything, be compassionate and be open-minded with your judgments when you are reading about wrongful convictions, watching something on wrongful convictions, listening to something on wrongful convictions. Ask yourself how you would want to be treated if you were in the shoes of someone who is wrongfully convicted. The wrongfully convicted are so much more than a case study. They're people, they're individuals, they're dreamers. You know, they have children, they're someone's child. Keep that in mind. So, I'll leave you with a few thoughts. First of all, thank you for being here and opening your minds and your hearts. I hope that this has been an opportunity for you to learn something new, consider a different perspective. I hope you feel inspired. And I hope that next time you think about wrongful convictions, what comes to mind is the more human side of a wrongful conviction. Thank you.